"Retreat!" Kang bellowed, his voice booming through the cavern. "Withdraw!" Slith looked around, stared at him to see if he'd heard correctly. Kang waved, pointed to the chamber entrance that was located directly behind the Draconians. "Retreat!" he shouted. His throat was raw. He tasted blood. "Go back out the way you came!" Slith nodded once. The Draconians began an orderly retreat, taking their wounded with them. The fire dragons swooped and snapped after them. Flames flared all around them. Several more Draconians fell, but the rest did not break ranks, did not falter. Kang watched them. Pride for his men swelled in his breast. It was a good feeling to go out on. He waited until the last Draconian was clear. Slith turned, and it was only at that moment that he realized his commander had not followed. One of the fire dragons, angry at losing its prey, turned and saw Kang. The fire dragon lunged at him, jaws opening wide. Kang raised the wand and pointed it, not at the dragon, but at the ceiling of the cavern. The wand glowed blue, tendrils of lightning twined across its surface. Kang felt anger, his queen's anger. It was not directed at him, but at the fate that was crushing her, that would soon drive her from her throne, her world. He did not know or understand it then, but this was Takhisa's last petulant act, her final burst of fury, a hand slap across the face of the father who had come to avenge himself on his godchildren. Blue-white jagged lightning burst from the wall and struck the ceiling directly above the fire dragon's pit. Stalactites exploded, showering down huge chunks of rock. Boulders crashed into the pit, smashed the bodies of the fire dragons. Some lay crushed to the edge of the pit. Others managed to escape and disappeared rapidly, diving into the pit's molten depths. The beam of light was protecting Kang from the chunks of ceiling hurtling down on top of him. Striking the halo of light that surrounded him, the rocks bounced harmlessly off, rolled to the floor. Rock dust rose into the air. Lava splashed in great gouts around the cavern room. Kang could no longer see the ceiling, but he kept the light aimed in that direction. A deep rumbling shook the chamber. The floor was beginning to break apart, shatter. "Sir!" That was Slith's voice, howling through the chaos. Kang started to back up, one footstep at a time, feeling his way toward the exit behind him, the exit the dwarves had taken. It was much darker in the room now. The fiery light was dying as the pit filled with debris. Hopefully, this meant that the fire dragons were dying. The only light was the radiant blue light surrounding him, and suddenly, that light went out. The wand went dead in Kang's hand. Rocks struck him, small ones, shards flying through the air, lacerating scale and skin. A chunk the size of a fist struck his shoulder. Another rock tore one of his wings. The cavern room was caving in. Kang made a convulsive leap for safety. He landed on his belly, cracked his ribs, and knocked the breath from his body. The floor beneath his feet shook. Rocks thundered and crashed around him. Short, dark figures surrounded him. Hands with fingers, not claws, grabbed him. Hairy faces bent over him. The dwarves lifted him up by his harness and dragged him toward the exit. There they dropped him. One of the dwarves leaned down, plucked the wand from Kang's nerveless hand. "Nice doing business with you," the dwarf said, and dashed off. And then all was dark around Kang. All was dark inside him. Coughing from the rock dust that rolled out of the dragon's chamber in great, choking clouds, Selquist slowed his run to a walk. He kept a wary eye on the ceiling, but though it shook and shivered, it did not seem prepared to tumble down on top of him. "I think I see the others," Selquist pointed. The flickering light of a torch was barely visible through the murky dust. Their comrades were gathered together beneath a huge support beam, obviously expecting the whole mountain to come crashing down about their ears. The dwarves were a sorry sight, bereft of their weapons, most of them barefoot. "Who's that?" cried Belmer, peering through the dust. "It's Selquist. And Mortar, and Pestle, and Augur added." "What took you so long?" Belmer demanded. "We've got eggs to crack. Let's get going." The dwarves started off, Belmer in the lead. Before too long, the dwarves came to a stop. "What is it?" Selquist asked, pushing his way through to the front. Before them was a large cavern. "This must be it," Selquist said, his voice tight with excitement. "Shine the light in there." The cavern was long, shallow, and a most distinctive shape. "Yes," said Selquist. "I'm positive this is it. I recognize the shape, like a half moon. The antechamber's back there somewhere." The dwarves swarmed inside, searched hastily around. Discarded tools littered the floor. Mined rock was piled up at one end. The iron rails entered it, but they didn't leave it. They ran straight into a solid rock wall. Not a single steel coin was on the floor. Nary a jewel glittered from out of the pile of rock. "Where's the treasure?" Belmer demanded. "Behind that wall," said Selquist. "It's false," he added. Selquist recalled the notes left by the scribe. They hid the treasure and then put a false front over it, making it look like the rest of the wall. If we can find that part, we should be able to knock the false wall in easily. The dwarves spread out and began rapping on the wall with their knuckles, hoping to find a portion that sounded hollow. Eventually, Mortar called excitedly, "I found it!" Mortar knocked against the wall with the head of the pick. In one place, the pick thumped. In another, it rang. The dwarves gathered around to watch. Using the handle of the pick, Mortar scratched out an area on the rock that appeared to be the entrance to the treasure chamber. The dwarves went to work with a will. Scrounging up tools, they beat on the wall with hammers and picks. Chips flew. The dwarves bashed at the wall with such vigor that it crumbled beneath the blows. "We're through!" Mortar shouted. He dropped the hammer. The dwarves surged forward, struggling to enter the small aperture. Selquist managed to squeeze inside first. Behind him, the other dwarves pushed and shoved. Holding the torch high, Selquist stood still and stared. He was too awed and amazed, charmed and dazzled to speak. One by one, the other dwarves clambered into the room. They, too, looked around and fell silent. They'd found the stolen treasure of Naraka. When Kang came to, he could not remember exactly what had happened, but he knew that he should be dead, and he was vaguely surprised that he wasn't. 12 Draconians stood around him. They were covered in rock dust and blood. Their scales were charred and burnt, but every one of them was grinning. "Water," Kang croaked. Slith handed Kang a water skin. He drank thirstily. "Any orders, sir?" Slith asked. Reaching out, he attached something to Kang's harness, the commander's medallion. Kang looked at it, shook his head. He couldn't think of a single thing to do. "No, Slith, no orders." "Then, sir," Slith said respectfully, "might I suggest that we continue on down the tunnel? We think the treasure room's at the other end." Kang gazed dazedly, stupidly at his second. "You're saying that the tunnel leading to the treasure is..." "You're sitting in it. It's marked on the map, but the map shows that it was blocked off. The cave-in must have opened it up." Kang prodded his dull brain to action. He shook his head gloomily. "Even if it does, and we find the treasure, the only way out is blocked off." "Not so, sir. The side tunnel is still open." "That's where we were when the roof fell in. We dug our way through to where we figured we might find you. The route's clear. It won't be easy, but we can make it. I sent a couple of scouts down it, sir. Not only is the tunnel free of debris, but they heard the dwarves banging and hammering. That was just a short time ago, sir." Slith spread out the map. He called for the lantern. "Look here, sir. The treasure is located in this part of the antechamber. By the symbols, the dragon eggs are over in this part. Even if the dwarves do break through, they might be distracted by the treasure long enough..." Kang was on his feet, hope sparking his weary, aching muscles into action. "Let's go," he ordered. The dwarves stared at the treasure, speechless. Steel coins spilled out of partially open chests. Rubies, emeralds, sapphires and diamonds, and myriad other precious gems, sparkling in settings that were lovely and fantastic, lay strewn on the floor, as if some clumsy lady-in-waiting had carelessly overturned her mistress's jewel box. This was the booty of a greedy, rapacious empire. Armor still bright, still polished, and obviously magical, was piled in a corner or stood silent sentinel on stands against the wall. Weapons that shone with a fey light were stacked haphazardly against a wall. Spellbooks of innumerable colors lined another wall. Jumbled among them were magic scrolls, tied in ribbons of black, white, or red. Chests and casks, unopened, ranged about the chamber, tantalizing the dwarves with the possibility of what further treasure lay hidden from their sight. The dwarves surged into the chamber, began rummaging around. Crying out in joy, they stuffed their pockets with jewels, poured coins down their underwear. At the height of everyone's elation, Mortar made a devastating discovery. He pointed out that the tracks came to a dead end. They were in a cul-de-sac, with no way out. The other dwarves halted their gloating and counting, and turned pale. Selquist shrugged, and was about to say that they'd just go out the way they'd come in, when he remembered that the way they'd come in was blocked by a couple 100 tons of rock. He gulped. The dwarves were glaring at him. "This isn't my fault," Selquist protested. "If it hadn't been for those stupid Draconians who caused the cave-in, we would have..." He paused. The thought of the Draconians had just given him an idea. "Say," said Augur, who'd been exploring in another part of the chamber and hadn't heard the terrible news, "I've just found a whole chest loaded with eggs. At least we can live off those eggs for a while. That should delay our deaths." "Huh? Deaths?" Augur looked blank. "What'd I miss?" "Selquist has led us into a dead end," Belmer announced. "And Selquist," said Selquist proudly, "will lead you out." The dwarves regarded him doubtfully. Selquist pulled a magic wand out of his sleeve. "This is the very wand which the Draconians used to bring down the ceiling. I will use it to tunnel through the rock. Augur looked shocked. So that's what you stole from that dead draconian? His face wrinkled. I don't think it's right to steal from the dead, Selquist. Do you know how to use that wand? Demanded Velmer. Of course, said Selquist. Velmer appeared dubious, but he only shrugged and said, Let's get going then. We've got treasure to count. The dwarves started off, Velmer leading the way. Now that everyone was occupied, Selquist could figure out how to use the wand. Show me those dragon eggs, he said to Augur, and the two started off for a dark and secluded part of the antechamber. Selquist intended to get in a little wand practice. Pleased to show off his discovery,